Hey guys, we're just going back for another will it start. We've got an Aussie Falcon this time that's been sitting for a long time. The rust has overtaken the poor old girl, but hopefully she'll still want to burst into song. You can tell by my throat that I've been suffering from the lurgy for the last week, and colds and flus don't usually affect me, but this one has, and I will admit that knocked me around. And they talk of man flu. Yeah, I definitely had man flu. Deb's had it as well, but being the trooper that she is, she's just brushed it off, so it clearly was man flu and not people flu. Right. So this is the edge of our little world. That fence line just here is our boundary. It used to all be teal property all the way around us, but when my dad retired from farming and I didn't really want to take it over, I wasn't in a position to do so at the time, we sold it all off bar this original block. And our little piece here, start swinging forward again, our little piece here my great-grandfather took up in 1928. So been teals living here ever since. I've had the cows in here and they've munched all the grass off, so that's good. And this part of the world was all swamp sort of country before white collars come along. Have a look over there in front of us, the big flooded gum. They were the big trees that were growing here, and behind that across the paddock there's some melaleucas, and that was sort of typical because it was all tea tree and melaleuca scrub through here on this block. But here's our victim in front of us, old Falcon ute. Well, here she is. It's pretty rotten. It was pretty rotten when it was given to me. Now, this car belonged to a friend of mine, and it was his work vehicle. He'd owned it for a long time. I used to actually do service work on this car when it was a tidy thing, and I did a lot of repair work for this guy. And between us, we sort of discussed what he should replace this car with, because he'd had this thing for a long time. Had such a good run out of it. Anyway, between us we decided with a V6 Holden would be the next step along the line, so that's what he went with. And I was in at his shop one day repairing his forklift, and the Falcon was still sitting in the yard, still registered at the time, and he just made the comment. He said, "You want to take that home for your kids to drive around your block?" And I thought about it and I said, "How much fuel's in it?" He says, "Oh, probably about 3/4 of a tank." And he said, "There's a new retread on the back as well." And I said, "Done deal, mate, I'll have it." So I drove it home that night. We took the plates off it, and he met me in there and gave me a lift back for my other car, and I came home in that. So, but this was a really cool paddock car. The air conditioner even worked. Like, when I was a kid, I had to go and drag home half a car, bring home another half a car, get an engine out of one, put in another one that went. My kids got given something. You jumped in, turned the key, it's automatic, air conditioning works, like spoiled, like kids today. Now, I'm pretty certain she's an 84. We might have a look at that in a minute and see if we can work it out. The engine's sort of a bit buried, but it looks like we've still got all the plug leads and things on. I came and had a look the other day, and there's no way of turning it. Like, the fan's just sitting there spinning in the breeze, the alternator's gone, the aircon compressor's gone. But I'll put a couple of bolts in the bottom in the balancer and see if I can turn it on that. But we do have a key, so that's a start, but I don't know if we can get the doors open. So maybe we'll start with getting the doors open, or a door open, and go from there. There's a handle on this side. Now these were a great car when they were new. Like, rust was their biggest drama. Their door handles were a problem. They used to die pretty regularly. Oh, it worked, got him. But Ford nailed it when they built these. It was just such a great car. They had a really good engine. They ran really well. They had power to weight was brilliant. Fuel economy was good. And then they wind up dead like this in the paddock. So we'll see what we can do with the bonnet. Yeah, as far as running goes, it's relatively intact. The leads are all on it, and I don't think there's any cut wires anywhere in this car. So it was sort of running and got parked, and the bloke come along and wanted a few parts off it, so I just said go for it. So first job will be to see whether or not we can get anything to turn. There's the bonnet latch. It's always handy to have.
This would have to be a bit tongue in cheek, wouldn't it?
I think so. If it turns, it should go. If it don't turns, we're wasting our time. So I was putting a bit of thought into this as well. I'm hoping to just... Oh, this one's got a bolt. I wasn't expecting that. It's got a bolt in the end of the crank. Well, we'll see what we can do with that. Don't know if I'll have a spanner. I'd forgotten these had a bolt. I didn't think they did. All right. Now on this car, we need 2 full revolutions of the crank to go through everything happening. This is one of those cars where the valves can hit the piston. So these would have problems when they were parked up, when they were wholesaled. Now a lot of government departments ran these Falcons, and when they retired them and replaced them, they'd wind up going to auction, but sometimes they'd sit around for 6 months or so before that would happen. And this is these young cars. Sure as egg, someone would go to start it up, one of the valves would grab, piston would cloud it and bend it, and then it's a 4.5 cylinder or a 5 cylinder Falcon. And when I had my garage in town, when I first started out working by myself, one of the neighbours in there was an electrician, and he would always go and buy the panel vans from the auctions, and every one that he bought, I wound up pulling the heads off them and doing the valves in them and having to replace a few bent valves every time. So we'll give him a turn. No, we got no hope. And just broke a socket. It's always handy. Yeah, I don't think she's going to go. I think we just created a bit of useless footage and broke a socket.
Call it.
Might be. Yeah, I'm thinking we're going to call it. Might just pull a plug or two out and have a look, but I think we're wasting our time here. Broken socket, we'll see what we can do with that. The alloy head's always going to be the problem with these. But she's feeling pretty solid to me. What actually happens is if the head corrodes through, and I know this head has had some corrosion issues, it'll just fill a cylinder up with water, and it was left sitting. Get that back in there without the junk falling out. It was just left sitting with water in it, and this one, the head's been welded up on it a few times in the past. That's a damper at the party because I was hoping this one would go. Now that one looks clean as well. If we find that they're all clean on the plugs, we might see if we can put a bigger bar on it. Have a go at that. The air cleaner's rusted through on top, so the moisture could have just come straight down the carby too. Skeeter beating a hole in me. There you go, fatal mistake. So they're still, like they're clean and they're a bit oily. It was burning a bit of oil. So if we find that they're all like that, I had this one saved up, you know. I knew it was running, so I was a bit disappointed really. It was one of those engines that, you know, if I needed a Falcon engine, I could have grabbed this one and put into something. It's like tired and still running, still means it works. I think it would have come out on here. It's got him. That's another one that's still looking like she'd still be running on that one.
How many years have you had it saved up for, Rob?
A few. It's been here, I reckon, about 15 years. Roughly, you know. Yeah, time gets away. Sometimes you sort of think they haven't been here that long. It's sort of funny when you remember something as a going to town car and then it's sort of sitting here looking like this, you know. It's sort of, they seem a bit dilapidated and ordinary and a bit sad. Should be a date over there somewhere. I don't know if I can read it. Tags have all gotten a bit sad. Just looking at the brake pipes and things like that, they changed a few of these things around. That's still reasonable looking plug, you know. We might have a chance. Might just have grabbed, you know, and just want someone to put a little bit of effort into it and get it to turn. All is not lost yet. We shall want to go back and get a bigger socket and a bigger bar and see if we can break something. All the plugs look like they'd be working. Might lay them out in order. So I think that's just dirt. That one's probably possibly got a bit of a corrosion issue. Just sort of looking around that. I don't own a borescope. I can't look in there, but I'll just throw a bit of stuff down it. See if we can get some movement before we give up on it completely. If we've got a dead hole and it's got a bit of moisture in it, we can always hope that the piston's up near the top. Alright, a little bit of lube down the hole. I'll grab a socket and see what we can do. I'll have to go back to the shed though. Just went looking for my 13/16 socket, but apparently Rob's had it out of the toolbox and not put it back at some stage. But I found a handle and I've got a 21mm socket, so that's sort of metric 13/16, so that'll work. And I've got a cheater bar as well. This is pretty cool stuff. This is a bit of pipe out of a milking machine. It's stainless steel, lightweight, but they make really good cheater bars for socket handles. I might just try a little bit of backwardsing on it first, just in case we're sitting up against a stuck valve. Now she's tight. We still might be dead in the water, guys. It's got oil at the right level, so it's not like it's got a belly full of water. Ha! Ha! Alright. Now, diagnostic mode, people. We're going to do 2 full revolutions on the crank to make sure that we're not going to have a piston whack a valve and bend it. And we also want to be listening at this stage. It's going to be a bit hard on this one because there's a bit of grass and stuff around and things moving like that. And I might just unhook the belts and get them out the way. But if we've got a cylinder with a bit of rust film in it and we're turning it, you're going to hear it. It's going to sort of... Now you know the sound, because back when you were in grade 5, Mrs. Timmers put her fingernails on the blackboard and she did this and went and every kid in the class knew exactly what was going on. It was time to pay attention. Well, we've got to do the same thing. We've got to pay attention if we've got this going. Now, if we had the plugs in it and we're starting to turn them, we'd hear that. Straight away, get them out. Get some lube in all the barrels, because that rust, the rings are going to scrape it all the way up and it's going to pack around the top ring. And if we get some lube on there, we'll get some of it will slide past. Not going to worry the rest of it, the motor's already history. But if you've got any chance at all getting going, get that bit of lube in there before you actually wind up pushing this rust ring up. And I've had them where they'll turn for piston will travel 1/3 of the rotation, and then they just jam because of this rust sitting around the top. So that's why we need the lube. So we might just see if we can mark the pulley somehow. Tried to think of everything we're going to need, but I didn't think about what I was going to need to mark the pulley with. How about a bit of oil? Just put a dab of oil in there. Just made a new timing mark with an oil line.
Where's your timing mark?
Down there, next to the timing pointer. See? Just across the pulley there. Now it's getting exciting. Crunk, crunk, crunk. Belt's getting a bit tangled up. It's rusted into the groove in the pulley. You can tell I used to service this car. Look at this. Daco belts. I'm not responsible for the Top Gun leads though. They've happened since I stopped playing with it. I'd only ever fit Daco or Gates belts onto engines. There was a valve. I just came up against a little bit of pressure, pushed hard, and all of a sudden she sprung free, and that was a piston just pushing on a valve, and the valve's popped the last way closed, so that's a good thing. We're coming up one turn. That's halfway through the revolution. We need to go 2 turns because the camshaft travels at half crankshaft speed. So for all the valves to have gone through a opening and closing phase, you need to turn the crank around twice. We've done that, and she's actually starting to turn pretty easy. That's good. Right, let's throw the plugs back in. Now I've clearly played with this. It's got what have we got? 3 different brands of spark plug. So I'd say it's oiled up plugs and things when we were using it for a paddock car. Now we had a lot of fun in the paddock with this car, kids and I. Deb would come occasionally. But with having a bit of acreage, it's pretty good fun, you know. We'd marked out the same track pattern as Top Gear TV show had around the airport. And we had the same pattern as that. And we'd all get out there with these old cars that we had. Kids would all be going each, and Deb and I'd get down there and we'd have our little races. It was pretty good fun. Kids grew out of it. That was a sad thing. I didn't. I'd go and do it now, you know. People sort of look at you a bit funny if you're just sort of driving around in circles in your own paddock.
I remember a grey sedan with the bumper hanging off.
Yeah. That one went quick. That was cooler than this. It's over there. Somewhere. It's over there anyway. There's an AU Falcon sedan we got for a parts car, or actually a reference car for working on a lot of the suspension for the Boss Goss. But it had been side swiped down one side of it. One back door didn't work. But it was a really low mileage Falcon, and it was an LPG petrol job, and it had broken the fuel tank. So they always start up on gasoline, petrol, and then switch over to LPG. So it wouldn't run because of the fact that it had no petrol in it. So I'd just bypass the wiring and short the LPG solenoid out and get it to fire and run, and then she'd run on the LPG. But whereas these old jiggers, the Holdens and things like that, we'd get them to like the speed limit in the paddock, so you looking 60 mile an hour, 100 k's an hour sort of thing on the dirt. The AU Falcon, you can get that to 160 k's an hour, 100 mile an hour in the same distance in the paddock. That one was a lot of fun.
Well, you should probably mention that you have an LPG ticket.
Yeah, you get that. Ah, my misspent youth and not so youth. I'm not going to get real carried away with new plugs or anything like that. But if we can get this one running, it means that we've got a spare Falcon motor that might work for something else, you know. Just being very careful. There's a bit of rust and scale stuff sitting around the spark plug seats, so I don't want to be knocking all gobs of that down inside the cylinders. I really like this model. You know, when I left school, I'd actually already had a job before I left school, so I went straight from school, finished school on a Wednesday afternoon, went to work Thursday morning. And the first car that I ever worked on as an employed apprentice was one of these. It was brand spanking new. It was a station wagon, and we fitted driving lights to it, and we put an electric brake unit in underneath the dash for a caravan, and we put an auxiliary power wire down the back of the car, in the cargo area in the back of the car, to run an Angel fridge. That was the first job. Yeah, I'd actually gone and done work experience at the shop where I did my apprenticeship from school, so I had a week off school, which that was the best part of the whole deal, was a week off school. And anyway, my dad's quite well known in this part of the world back then, around the garages and things like that. He was a well-respected mechanic. He'd been in the region forever. So sort of the first question the guy asked me on the first day I was there, is you related to John Teal? And I said, yeah, he's my dad. So that sort of put me in there pretty good straight away. And it was sort of funny. It was Dad's idea that I go and do work experience at the auto electrical shop. And last thing in the world I'd thought of doing, I didn't want to be an auto leccy. I wanted to be a panel beater so I could make old cars into new cars. Anyway, for once in my life I listened to the wisdom of the previous generation, and I actually asked why I should become an auto electrician, or even do work experience as an auto electrician. And he said, well, you know a fair bit about mechanics. He said he could teach me enough to be a good mechanic, but he couldn't teach me anything about electrics. And I said, what about panel beating? He said, oh, you teach yourself that, you don't worry about that. So, oh, okay. So we went with that. So I did the week at work experience. Now remember, I learned to read from an F.J. Holden workshop manual. So when we start walking around the workshop on the first day there, and they're sort of showing me the equipment and what it does, I'm pointing this stuff out. That's an armature growler. How'd you know that? I said, I read it in the book. And there's, look at that. There's all sorts of battery testers and things like that. And how'd you know that? And I said, I read it in the book. So that was sort of suddenly thinking, oh, this guy switched on. So that was a pretty good thing. It'd be good if I get the plug to go in the hole. Anyway, at the end of the week, I sat down with the boss and he actually paid me for my week's work experience. So that was pretty cool. And I sat there and I interviewed him. We went through the whole things of the benefits of being an auto electrician over any other sort of motor trade sort of job and things like that. And when it sort of was starting to wrap up and it's time for me to go home, I said, well, this looks like a pretty good place to work. When I finish school, I'll just come and start working here. Well, he never said no, so that's what happened. I just turned up after school and said, I'll finish school today, I'll be here tomorrow morning. And, oh, okay, we'll see you in the morning then. So I interviewed the boss and employed myself and became an apprentice. Now that was the end of 1981 and that was just when this model came out. So when I fronted for work the next day, there was this maroon station wagon parked in the entry to the shop, and the other guy that worked there, Martin, he was just getting ready to start working on it. And I said, what are we doing today? And he said, oh, we've got this XD Falcon here. And I looked at it, and the model before was the XD, this is the XE, and it was a station wagon, so the styling didn't really change on the back except for the back bumper. And the back bumper had these little ribs running across it that the XD didn't have. Their one was plain and smooth. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's no XD, mate, that's an XE, this thing's brand new. And sure enough, it had about 300 kilometres on it, I think, when we did the job on it. And people had bought it, they were going to head off around Australia, and they did. So ever since then, I've had a fondness for these. My boss bought one after I'd been there about a year, I think. And it was a ute, and within a week of it being delivered, me and the other apprentice, we had it at 180 kilometres an hour on a straight stretch of road, thoroughly tested it, and so it is pretty good, just out of the box.
Where can you do that in Australia, Rob?
Holy Mile. For anyone not from the area, there's a bit of straight road. I think it's down to a 90k zone now, which I think is 55 mile an hour. And it's called the Holy Mile because there's all the churches have got holiday camps out there in a row. There's a whole strip of them. Boy Scouts are on one end, Girl Guides are on the other end, and then there's all these church groups that got a camp out there. So it's always called the Holy Mile.
It occurs to me there's a whole lot of religion between the Boys and the Girls Scout camps.
It must be, yes. Keep them apart. Yeah. Maybe it's necessary. Alright, we know she turns. This is a really good thing. Wish I'd remembered which plug lead was number 1, but we can work that out easy enough. I think we know which one's number 6, probably the longest one, so we can work back from that. Now, a lot of cool stuff about this car. These were quite revolutionary, and not just this particular model, but the series. First, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, put it down in the comments, but I think they were the first production car in the world to have a plastic fuel tank. They also didn't have a fuel gauge sender as such, with a bar and a float on the end of it to make the fuel gauge work. It's got this strip of plastic looking material with some wires poked into it, and it reacts with the fuel to make the fuel gauge work. And that's pretty cool stuff. They had an electric speedo, which I think was sort of, for an Australian car, definitely a first. I don't know about the world. They also the first mass-produced car here in Australia to have the option of electronic fuel injection. And it was on this same 4.1 motor. Now, I was in the first group of auto electrical apprentices to actually learn electronic fuel injection, and because this was new on the market at the time, these 4.1s were the engines we learned on. So I learned a lot of stuff from that. We learned out of the Ford workshop manual, and strangely enough, one of my neighbours now, who lives a few miles up the road, wound up being the guy who actually wrote the workshop manual that I learned from. And I met him, well, within the last 10 years, and how crazy is that? Someone that worked for the Ford Motor Company just lives down the road from me. So I'll throw these on. These have got a really good Bosch electronic ignition on them, and it was sort of, they just got it together. Come around here, Deb, and have a look. We'll show everyone. It's been knocked off now. You can buy aftermarket versions, but they're nowhere near as good as the Bosch. So you got this dizzy down here, and inside you got a little pickup plate. I might just knock the cap off and have a look.
Yeah. I can't really see it.
Yeah. So we'll get the lid out, empty the rust off it. That might help it run. Get the rust out of the distributor. That just all fell in there. Won't like that much. We'll have to hook that out. We've got this pickup in here, little coil of wire down underneath it. That's the main part of the works. That's just your normal centrifugal advance. I'm going to have to get some of that rubbish out of there because that'll break it. And inside of this tin cover in here, you've got the electronics, the module there. So that's the standalone distributor. And they really give zero trouble. And in fact, to the point where it made the guys servicing them a little bit lazy, because with the older Fords that have point ignitions, you'd have to change the points and then readjust the timing. Whereas these just gave no trouble. Nobody adjusted the timing. So what happened over time is the timing chain would wear in these, and then the ignition would be retarded. So it was one of those things that every second or third service that these had come in, I would always just check the timing on them, and sometimes you just have to give them a little bit of a tweak. But most of the time they're pretty good. But because the ignition systems caused no problems, nobody would check the timing on them. So we can find out which plug was 6, and we can come back and work out where the rest of them are. So now, here's another little trick, people. This is your centrifugal advance. There's some little weights down underneath the gubbins in here, and they fly out, and they get further out against spring pressure the more the engine revs. So that advances the ignition up and pulls that up against the springs. But if you're not sure which way your distributor turns, just spring the vacuum advance, and this distributor turns that way, because that's the way it springs to. The way it comes back hard, that's the way direction it's come from. So we know that if this was number 1 down here somewhere, 5 would be the next one around that way. So we've got one plug lead, we know where it came from, and that's this one here's number 6. And from there we can work out where they fit on the distributor. Now here's a trick that's worth remembering, guys. If you take your firing order and split it in half, and you write the first half down, so we've got 1, 5, 3, and then you take the second half and you write it underneath it, 6, 2, 4. If we look at number 6 plug lead on the cap, which was this one here, the one opposite is number 1. So that's that one there. So you can go on number 1. So from number 1, we know that which way they go is number 5, which should be, there we go, this one here is number 5. And opposite number 5 on the cap, we'll have number 2. So what did we have? We had number 1, 5. So this one here should be number 2. Sitting in roughly the right spot. So then we've got 6, 2, 4. This one here should be number 4. And that's roughly the right length to go to number 4. So it looks like we're on the money with that one. And then we've got another one laying around somewhere. Where'd he go? Here is he. And he reaches down there. Okay. So we might get a bit of compressed air and just clean out that distributor. And then we should be just about ready to think about getting some fuel hooked up to it in the battery. Compressor pumped up, righto. Alright, most of the lumps are gone. There's a big one sitting up there, we'll flip him out. A little bit at the back. These have got 2/10 of no clearance in there, so any bits of rubbish in there can cause jam it. And once that happens, we can strip the little roll pin that fits in there. Right, hey, a little bit of tape's come off the coil. It's sitting in there, the pickup coil, and I guess it's because it's had moisture in it over the years. So hopefully that's not going to worry us. I do have a few other distributors laying around, so worst case scenario we could swap that out with another second handy. Now this engine started out in life as a non-cross-flow engine, and the manifolds were both on the other side of the engine to the distributor. The distributor used to be right out in the open all by itself and easy to work on. Then they converted them to a cross-flow and put the intake over this side and tucked the distributor in underneath it. But fortunately these electric ones don't give that much trouble, so you don't need to get in there very often. Well, we'll see if we can get some fuel organised. It is an automatic transmission, and some Rob's been in here and taken the radiator out and just cut the pipes off. So, don't know what we're going to do there because they've been kinked on the ends a bit, but it might just be a case of squish them a bit to let a bit of stuff through. Oh, that one's broken down there anyway, that'll be easy. And loop this bit of hose across them. Stop all the fluid going everywhere anyway. But we'll have a look at this scaly, horrible air cleaner and see if we can get that off. I think my compressor could do with new rings.
I noticed you don't have a wedding ring.
Oh, she got a bit of a lake in there. That's pretty nice. Okay, so we've got a bolt over the side. I think that was a 10 on these, and then the ones in the middle. If we didn't get it going at this point, we probably would have lost the chance forever. No, that's bigger than a 10. It is springtime here in Western Australia, and so we're getting to the point of the year where the tiger snakes are all wanting to wriggle around all over the place and look for girl tiger snakes and all that sort of stuff. Delving around in this sort of stuff, you need to be a bit wary. I think the air cleaner could do with a replacement too, the filter element. One of the signs on this generation Ford was to whether they were any good or not was how much oil was around this breather. That's the crankcase breather, so it comes up here from the rocker cover and through a pipe into there. So if they were clean around that, they were a really good running engine. Now here's one of the big reasons this engine was so successful. This little Weber carburettor was just the ants' pants. They're just a brilliant bit of kit. And they've only got a couple of minor little issues, and it's all to do with age, and it would sort of happen to all of them after a while. They've got a couple of little diaphragms in them. One of them's the accelerator pump, and the other one's the power valve. The accelerator pump one's in here, and the power valve one, I'm trying to remember where it is just hiding in the front in here. So if you come around in here, there's a little 4-bolt diaphragm there, which is the accelerator pump one, and a little rocker lever down the side here, and carby seized up, or the transmission cable seized up, probably the carby. So that one there would dry out and get a bit hard and crack, and the power valve's just hiding in the front down here. There's a little 3-bolt plate on the front, and when that one would play up, they'd be a bit hard to start. They'd miss and fart a bit and carry on and get a bit gutless on the road. And back when they were younger cars, and they were sort of our everyday bread and butter sort of vehicle to be servicing, I'd just buy those 2 diaphragms straight off Ford, and I'd always keep about 15 or 20 of them on hand, just because someone would come in with a Falcon and they say, oh, it's just not quite right, you know, it's not running right, and no one seems to be able to put their finger on it. So that's right, I can fix that for you. Usually just do it while they wait, just knock the 2 plates off, swap them over, put them back in, brum brum brum, they'd be happy. But just going to have to get the throttle to free up. Got a tiny bit of movement now.
Where's the throttle?
That's the linkage at the back here. Whoops, come around this side. Yeah. So we've got the throttle linkage is just in here where the cable's hooked onto it. So I'm just working it from the fast idle cam at the top here. So it's a 2-stage carburetor, primaries and secondaries, and just a magic little carburetor, typical of anything Weber. They know their stuff, those guys, those Italians. And let's be my bottle of squirt's starting to run out. I might just unhook that kick down cable to the car. Yeah, that's seized up. That's the cable for the transmission to knock it back a gear when you accelerate. That one there, and she's seized solid. So that's part of our problem. Ah, look at that. That's all our problem. Carby's happy. Okay, so let's unhook the fuel line. It's got a clamp on it. This one's got a return line back to the tank. So the fat one is the fuel up to the pump, the skinny one is the return back to the tank. With anything that's been sitting for any length of time, the fuel will have just gummed up and gone to tar and stuff like that. It's completely dry there, so I'm not going to try and suck any fuel from the tank. So we'll just put our fuel bottle on the ground, run a bit of hose across to that. And hopefully the pump's going to want to still pump a bit of fuel. Right. And we'll throw a battery in it. So we've got the negative one there, that goes straight to the front of the head. We can tell which one that one is. One down to the starter is the positive one. Looks Looks like that one's going to reach all right, but the negative one's going to be too short because of this one here. Now, always have a listen for a spark when you hook up battery for the first time. This is an old car, it could have had mice eating the wires, things like that. Could have wires have been cut off by people taking accessories off, a bit of a short, but if you touch on there and there's a bit of a zap straight away, sure indication you've got an electrical issue somewhere. But we've got none of that. The other thing is, don't rush in at this point and keep running around and doing stuff and making a heap of noise. You want to be listening for any sort of crackles, see any smells of smoke coming out and things like that. Electrical fault issue, but we don't seem to have any of that. So we might just hit the key and just see what it wants to do. Oh, we got light on under the dash here. Looks like the lights are on. The lights are on. There you go. Yeah, we've made sure it's out of gear, it's in park. Oh. Oh. Well, it cranks, but listen to how it cranks. It's not cranking all the way around. There's a few valves not sealing up. That quick spot is where it's leaking compression somewhere. Okay, it cranks. It's first thing done.
That's a whole lot more than we thought was going to happen.
Yeah. Now I've got a Worth pump bottle here. It says brake cleaner on the outside. It's actually telling fibs. It's just a brake cleaner bottle because they've got the best seals in them out of their set of bottles. It's actually got 2-stroke fuel in it, and it's a little bit old, but it's due for this one. Now, if you got something like this that's been sitting around for a while, and it's going to be a bit dry in the barrels and things when you want to start it up, a bit of 2-stroke oil is always good stuff. Just because it'll add that bit of lube in there. That's probably enough. We'll see what it wants to do. I mean, it's always got to be better if it's going to start on the key, isn't it? You can say, sat for 15 years and just started up off the key. It's trying. She wants to go. Oh, throttle sticking, don't like that. No, we've used that fuel. Well, it feels heavy. There could be some fuel coming up. I think we'll just put a starter button on it so I can squirt at the same time as I crank it. Okay.
Gurgles.
It gurgles. Where's it gurgling from? Sounded like water to me.
It did.
Oh, who knows? What am I looking for? Starter button. Just had another thought too, you know. There is another possibility with that gurgle that doesn't bear thinking. Oh no, it's still there, that's all right. This one, after it was a paddock car, I figured we needed to have a sporty dash, so I put a sporty dash in it out of another one, which is kind of cool because you need to have a sporty rev counter dash when you're driving them around the paddocks. That's mandatory. And that was kind of cool, but then a fella come along and he wanted to swap me some Holden parts for some Ford parts, and he particularly wanted a sporty dash. And so I said, yeah, take the sporty dash, mate, that's all right. And I just suddenly thought with that gurgle, maybe he took the oil sender that made the sporty dash work, and it was just spurting oil out all over the place, but that's still hiding there, so that's all right. I want to pull that away from the exhaust manifold so we don't melt that. That's what we want. Maybe we'll run it through here as well. And we've got, oh, she's wide open. That throttle cable's stuck. Got one of the locals coming for a look. This chap here. He's heard the story. Yeah, I think that's just water. Look at that.
Little gecko.
Yeah, skink.
Now I heard where the water was coming and gurgling from, and I reckon it's down here, this water.
Yeah.
Not one of these pipes or that.
Possible. Sounds like she's losing combustion into the cooling jacket for that to be happening because the water pump's not turning. What do you reckon? A bit more fuel? I reckon that fuel should have just about pumped up by now if it was going to pump up. Maybe our pump's not pumping. See if we prime him with it and see what happens. No, we're not getting fuel where we want it to be. Well, that's trying. Yeah, fuel pump might have died and gone completely. They haven't always a bit of fuel in there. Should spit fuel out of there if it's working. Well, the fuel pump's pumping, so that's something. We've got a little couple of solenoids. There's one there and one there that are for the shut the carburetor down, they're anti-dieseling things. You can hear that one clicking, he's working. So this one here, that should be, that one controls the fuel into the engine.
Can't hear anything.
No, you can't hear anything. Maybe we'll just loosen that one off a little bit. Feels like it might have been cross-threaded in the past a bit too. Not hearing much there anyway. Let's see what that does anyway. It's alive! It's alive! Just look at that! Told you she wanted to go.
You see the white smoke out the back?
Yeah, check it out. Might see if it wants to drive. Come around here and have a look. Come down here. Check the wheel out. It's in gear, but it doesn't look like it wants to drive much.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. I was just hoping it would spin the wheel around.
Oh, okay.
Does it spin the wheels?
No.
No. Oh, it looks like the
You
transmission.
blackened off the exhaust.
Yeah. There you go. Let's see if it'll go again, eh? Let's see if it'll start off the key. Ha ha, look at that. She's almost fixed. You could call it almost restored, couldn't you? 1984 Falcon, sitting in the paddock. Grass is all grown through it. Almost set it on fire. Look at that, definitely got an issue with combustion leaking into the cooling system. So the head's corroded through again. You can see the water coming out now because of the combustion leak. And I knew this one had head issues. That's why it sort of got left down here like this. But who would have thought? She starts and runs. Earlier on when I swung on the front of the engine, I was about to give up on it, mainly because it was solid. I've had engines that have been grabbed on 3 and 4 cylinders and you can still spring the crank a little bit. Cranks are, even though they're solid steel, there's a bit of spring in them. So once you get a bar on there, you can often feel them move a little bit. This thing was just lock solid. So it surprised even me a lot that it spun around. So we've taken it from locked up solid and we've got it to the point where it runs. So 1984 Falcon, sitting in the paddock for 15 years. She starts and runs. It's definitely got a bit of a head combustion issue down there, the way the gases when steam was coming out of the port down there for the heater hose. But we kind of knew this already had some head issues and it had been welded a few times in the past. Big thank you for everybody who's been supporting our channel, the subscribers, whether you've been with us since day one or you've subscribed today. Thank you so much for that, really means a lot to us. Thanks for watching. With your help, we'll grow this channel in a big way. Stay safe everyone, we'll see you next time.